Well, good morning, and thank you for the invitation to be here with you this morning. Ann and I had a lovely drive down here this morning from Mill Valley, and with a with a name like Eichhorn, the name Eichhorn comes from the German, which meant farmers who live by the oak trees, and so it was wonderful driving through your streets, these magnificent old oak trees that shade your street. Um, Ann and I were overjoyed to see that you have a pipe organ. Um, the church where we worship every Sunday in Tiburon, we have a grand piano, but no organ. And it reminded me of a experience I had several years ago, a long time ago. I did an exchange with a pastor from Berlin, Germany. He came to Mill Valley, did my job. I went to Germany and did his job. And the first Sunday I was there, the organist was going over the service with me, and they had this magnificent pipe organ in the back of the church, up high where she sat with her back to the congregation, and a big mirror up there. And she pointed to going over the board, and she said, "And Bill, this is where you sing the Kyrie." And I said, "Frau Fisher, I don't sing the Kyrie." So she smiled and said, "Well, I was just kidding you. I will sing the Kyrie for you." Also, congratulations on your installation last Sunday. This is a milestone in a church's life and in David's life. So I've been told that it was a really wonderful affair, and that included tacos. So the two brief verses containing Mark's story of Jesus in the wilderness remind us of some very challenging words that are in the United Church of Christ statement of faith. Those words are: God calls us into the church to accept the cost and joy of discipleship, to be servants in the service of the whole human family. Now, the point of the story, I think, is that Jesus is faced with danger in the wilderness, just like he will be faced with danger and betrayal during his brief ministry. From the first days of his ministry in Galilee, Jesus finds himself in conflict with religious authorities who are beholden to the Roman power that will culminate in Jesus going to the cross. The wilderness sojourn prevents us from ever thinking that Jesus' ministry will be one only of honor and accolades. However, just as the perils of the wilderness did not defeat Jesus, so the dangers that await him will not defeat him either. From the wilderness to the cross, Jesus accepted both the joy and the cost of his discipleship. Perhaps he was tempted in some way to avoid this dangerous confrontation with the authorities who would be threatened by his ministry. Jesus would have seen the size and power of John the Baptist's movement, hundreds of people coming to the desert, drawn there by John's powerful prophetic preaching. He would have also seen how the religious authorities felt threatened by John's daring vision of change that so threatened them. And at the same time, as Jesus begins his ministry, John the Baptist is arrested and executed. Now, Mark doesn't elaborate on what those temptations in the desert were, as do Matthew and Luke. And I think that's because he wants us to be very clear that Jesus overcame whatever tempted him and embraced the risks of resisting the powers of evil. Mark wants us to understand that we, as followers of Jesus, will also be tempted to avoid exercising from time to time our prophetic imagination to which we are called. An imagination that envisions something different than the world in which we live. An imagination that understands that God has another vision for this world. I think one of the greatest temptations for the church today is fear. Fear that we're in danger of losing our democracy and that it will be replaced by some kind of autocracy that will destroy not only our democratic institutions, but the vision of a multicultural, multiracial society based on justice for all. Living with this fear will tempt us from time to time to despair, and fear erodes our faith. Despair extinguishes hope. So how do we overcome this fear that is so prevalent in our time? How do we hold on to that hope in a God that promises another way and watches over that promise? Well, one of the ways I think we combat this fear is to educate ourselves and our neighbors on what causes us to be so afraid. I think what you did last Monday, when you showed the documentary, God and Country, and invited the community in to attend, is one of those ways. And David's message in your newsletter was a perceptive introduction, I think, to the rise and danger of Christian nationalism. And like you, there are congregations across this nation that are doing the same thing. They are trying to combat the lies and the misinformation that bombard us each and every day. Another way we address this fear and this despair is to belong. To belong to a congregation that lives the cost and joy of discipleship. Hope, my friends, is renewed through community. The kind of community where relationships are based on trust and love, where scripture is a means of illumination, and the commitment to improve the neighborhood is lived in tangible ways, like a red wagon coming down the aisle, gathering food for those who need it. We can learn a great deal, I think, about what sustains us in community in times like this from the natural world. And one of the best examples, especially in these autumn days, are the habits of geese. Those habits are captured, I think, in a poem by an Oregon poet, Martha Royster, who lives on a tiny farm west of Portland under the Pacific Flyway. And her poem is entitled Autumn's Cloak. The quiet sky shatters open. Noisy wild geese pour through the V-shaped opening. They carry fall with them through the crack high in the sky. Their powerful wings drape an autumn cloak over the landscape far below. Summer green turns to brilliant fall, except conifers' stubborn defiance. Evergreen among hillsides aflame with reds and orange yellows. The quiet sky returns, but nothing is the same. The geese that we see in our skies during these days are harbingers of change in the seasons. And if we delve just a little deeper into the dynamics of the migratory V, we discover, I think, a lesson, a reminder about how to be church. Adriana Marie Brown, in her book, Emerging Strategy, observes this about geese. Birds don't make a plan to migrate. They don't raise resources to fund their way. They don't pack for scarce times. They don't map out their pit stops. They feel a call in their bodies that they must go, and they follow it, responding to each other, each bringing their adaptations. She says there is an art to flocking, staying separate enough not to crowd each other, aligned enough to maintain a shared direction, and cohesive enough to always move towards each other. Destiny, she concludes, is a calling that creates a beautiful journey. Destiny, a calling that creates a beautiful journey. And I think for us in the church, that translates into following Jesus creates a journey for us that is both costly and joyful. Would you say that you folks here at Foothills Congregational Church practice the art of flocking? I would guess that many of you came here seeking a community that would provide ways for you to feel a connection, a deeper connection to the divine. Some of you may have come here from religious institutions demanding rigid dogma or stale doctrine. But aren't you here because, like the geese, you are aligned enough in your beliefs and values to maintain that shared direction without crowding each other to believe in a particular way? Reverend Dorsey Blake, who is the presiding minister of the Church for the Fellowship of All Peoples in San Francisco, founded by Howard Thurman, he recently spoke about the art of flocking, and he offered an observation by Sharon Van Scheuer. And I quote, "Geese do not typically fly individually, but they tend to thrive in a flock. They get into the V formation because it distributes the hardships of travel. And the goose at the center of that V has the greatest challenge, which is why that goose only sits in that position for a brief time, peels off so another one can take the lead. And if a goose becomes too ill or too tired to continue, it leaves the flock, but not alone. Another goose helps it land, stays with it until it can return. Now, this social order that we see in the geese, I think, greatly contribute to our understanding of what it means to be church. And it's some authorities on geese, they think that the honking that we hear from down here are the geese encouraging each other in the long journey. The art of flocking suggests, I believe, that we are called, like the geese, we are called to encourage one another when the days are hard and when we are tempted to lose heart, when we are tempted to despair. And it is our calling to care for and stand with those most vulnerable in our community. It is our calling, our destiny to resist hate speech and stand against violence. This calling finds expression in a hymn called Migratory V. It's not in the hymnal, but it's a hymn. It was written by a fellow named Adam Guttal, who happens to be the grandson of Richard Rodgers, who wrote a lot of music. So the song goes like this: we sail above the weather, we search the ocean's floor, We rival our creation, still yearning for more, but we can fly together, a migratory V. How wonderful if that's what God could see. A single voice in a whispered prayer can only pray to travel there. But all as one, we sound the everlasting sound and sing our salvation aloft and in formation. A migratory V. How wonderful if that's what God could see. My friends, as I said, it is our calling to fly together into something like a migratory V. The church is a body of people with a vocation, with a calling to serve the world beyond itself, to stand with the most vulnerable, and stand with one another in difficult times. The church helps us resist fear and despair. And if we keep on honking, if we keep true to our vocation, we will find our strength renewed. Now, you've heard that text from Isaiah 40. We will discover we can run and not be weary. We will walk and not faint. We will mount up on wings as eagles, maybe as geese do. Aloft in formation, a migratory V. How wonderful that would be. May it be so.